Welcome to What You Need to Know, a Canadian Polycast. I'm Alison Fair, consultant here at Bluesky Strategy Group, and I am pleased to have with me today Tim Barber, Neil Brody, and Cam Holstrom. Hello, everybody.
Good morning.
Hello there.
I am going to jump right in today and ask you about the polling. That seems to be the talk right now. Is it too early to be worrying about what the polls are saying? Tim, I'll go to you first.
No, because I think that the campaigns, I'm like a moth to a flame. I look at the polls every day, right? And we're up, we're down. So yes, it makes a big difference. And I think, but ultimately, from what I'm hearing, is that pollsters are having very hard time, in the same way that door-to-door people are having a hard time. A lot of people are away. I don't think people are fully engaged. I've always said I think the real campaign starts on September 7th. So That's in a snapshot.
All right. Cam, do you worry about what's being done in the polls right now? I mean, in terms of the party you follow, they seem to be doing quite well. Is it too early to kind of be thinking about what the polls are saying?
Once the writs are drawn up, you hit the time where it's time to start worrying about it. Before that, fine, but now it matters. And it's true. There are still 4 weeks left. A lot can change by the end. And frankly, if you look at our last few federal elections, that is precisely what happened. But at the same time, they follow trends. And I think the reason why the polls matter right now is because you are seeing trends play out that are good for some parties, mine included, and not so good for others. But at the same time, I think in the last few campaigns, we've seen trends happen, and we really haven't seen them reversed.
So
and
what you say trends there, Cam? What do you mean by trends?
Well, just the general direction of the polling. The Liberals have been sliding, the Conservatives have been rising, the NDP have been rising, the Greens are falling off, the PPC are higher than many expected. And again, it's like a lot. It's not so much the day-to-day poll that matters; it's the trend of where it's going, what you're seeing build over time. And once again, the campaigns are sensitive to that because it's hard to turn around a trend, and that usually involves making some change. That's why last week I mentioned the one thing I was looking for is who'd be the first to freak out, because typically that's a sign that they're seeing a bad trend and they got to figure out how to stop that trend and turn it back the other way.
So did anyone freak out? And I should have asked that right off the top.
Yeah, I would argue that the Liberals started freaking out on Sunday a little bit sooner than I thought. But again, when you're seeing the polling play out right now, that's understandable why they would be that. What the message they're putting out there? Something isn't landing, something isn't fitting, and they're trying to find a way to correct that.
Okay. Neil, you tend to be under the blue tent with the Conservatives. Polls are suggesting that Mr. O'Toole is doing well. And what do you think about what's going on with what the pollsters are finding amongst Canadian voters?
Well, I'd take viewers back to May, June, when it sounded like Conservatives wanted to have a leadership contest because they weren't sure if Mr. O'Toole could handle a Justin Trudeau-led march to 300 seats in the next election. And I would echo what Tim and Camus said. Right now you're just looking at trends, and when the expectations for Mr. O'Toole coming to this election were quite low, he led off the first few days with a great ready-to-go election campaign when the Liberals didn't actually look like they were ready for a campaign that they called. But it is too early to assign any value to voting intentions reflected in the polls. The polls right now are great for looking at the trends to see if someone's on the rise or on the fall. The other thing that polls are doing right now is giving lift to campaign people. So I would imagine the Conservatives right now are riding quite high and have a high morale, and perhaps the Liberal campaigners are not feeling so good. And you might have seen that with Mr. Trudeau looking a bit frazzled this week in some of his media availabilities.
But could that be, Neil, to that point, could it be the fact that Trudeau is having to deal with a lot of other things, i.e. Afghanistan, and what's going on there, that it's kind of taken away from the campaign?
Oh, 100%. I still don't think Mr. Trudeau has a good answer for why did he call this election. At the very first smell of an election back, I think 2 Fridays ago, when it looked like all arrows were pointing to an election call, the big question was, why are we going to an election in the middle of a pandemic? And now it has morphed into, why are we going to an election during a pandemic? And while the government should have been sitting at their desks in Ottawa trying to figure out how to get Canadians and Afghans who served the Canadian forces out of Kabul and the rest of Afghanistan, for sure. I mean, being in government means you have to be in government. I fully expect that Mr. Trudeau thought this was going to be a cakewalk, and he's learning that there are more outside things that can happen during an election than he may have thought. Afghanistan, these are all things that are happening because they're in government, not because their election platform is being discussed, or not because something bad happened, like in the last election, blackface pictures surfacing of Mr. Trudeau. These are the wheels of government turning while an election is being called, and it's reflecting on his campaign, because he's being pulled off message every day.
So
But I also
Tim,
think,
yeah, go
just
ahead,
quickly,
Tim.
so another, side of polling positively, as Mr. Singh and Mr. O'Toole are right now, is that at some point the media will start putting them under scrutiny, because they've had a bit of a cakewalk themselves thus far. And Aaron O'Toole may actually walk out of a studio. But and I know it's tragic that your member of parliament, Pierre Poilievre, has had to put his leadership ambitions on ice for now. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, there's still a lot of time left, and but I will say there's a ton of volatility in the electorate right now.
So
which
Tim,
I don't think was anticipated prior.
okay, and taking that stuff that Neil brought in, the factors that are still part of being a government, and what they're seeing on the campaign in terms of voter appeal, is that go into the campaign, when into the strategy in the war room? Are they starting to look at these polls and what else is taking place as a government and use that within the strategy on the campaign trail?
I'm assuming yes. I don't know that for certain, but I think that there has to be concern among candidates, and I think what they look for is, polls. I think, if they're favorable, are kind of a security blanket. You feel a lot better. Somebody was asking the other day, do lawn signs make a difference? Yeah, they do. They give a little boost. Polling gives a boost. You've got a bit of a bounce in your step. At the end of the day, though, you still have to get people out to vote, and you have to have a ground game. And I will use one example of the NDP. Jagmeet Singh is polling way ahead of his party right now. Can his popularity be turned into votes? To me, again, it's all up in the air at this point. I don't see a majority in the cards for anybody at this point. I do see absolute chaos after the 20th. And to remind people, mail-in ballots, up to 20% of Canadians have said they're interested in using a mail-in ballot. I think a lot of votes are not going to be counted until days after.
Well, and that's a good point, right? Because we're coming into that, I think the second week of September, just after the long weekend, you have to have your mail ballot in. So if you're going to do it now. Quickly around, Neil, who do you think won last week? And what do you think we should be looking at for the week ahead in week 4?
I mean, who won, I don't know, but Mr. Trudeau lost, arguably. He was on his back foot trying to explain government decisions while he's trying to campaign for his desired majority government. Yesterday he was talking about $500 for seniors while explosions were ripping through the Kabul airport, killing civilians and U.S. servicemen. It came out as tone deaf. He had his Minister for Gender Equality calling the Taliban her brothers, which I get the cultural reference, but it's tone deaf to a domestic audience going to an election. So I think Mr. Trudeau has to tighten his game up a bit next week. I don't know how he does that, quite honestly. But next week it'll be more questions about Afghanistan. I assume there'll be more questions about PHAC not reporting COVID numbers daily, and he'll have to answer those questions while trying to get a majority government.
Okay, Cam, who won for you this week, and what are you looking for in the next week?
Well, for me, the winners of the week were definitely the Conservative and NDP campaigns. Because again, you're seeing that trend continue to rise. And particularly for the NDP, it's been a matter of being able to withstand the barrages that have come from the Liberals about the usual tactic of trying to scare progressive voters into stopping the big bad Tory. And
Just wait.
They're going to ramp up. They're going to get crazier. They've already been ramped up to 10. I don't know how much higher you can go. This isn't Spinal Tap. You can't go to 11. I think the problem for the Liberals right now is that I think the people's trust in Mr. Trudeau has gone down significantly. I think it's been eaten away at, and that means the message doesn't land as well. I saw on Twitter before we came on this morning to do this from now outgoing MP Adam Vaughan lamenting that with a Conservative government, all their childcare agreements are now at risk, and we must stop them from being at risk. Whereas my initial thought when I read that was, well, if you hadn't called an election that wasn't necessary, none of it would have been at risk. And I think that's why some of this falls flat, is that when you try to pull that card and say we need to protect these things, well, it's not an NDP vote that put those things at risk. It was the ambition from the PMO that put them at risk.
It's convenient for dippers to. Sorry, you finished, Ken.
I was going to say, and unfortunately for the government, they don't. The usual line may cut through with some, but I don't think it's going to be near as effective because of that.
Okay.
It is fun to watch the NDP forget that they actually supported this government through thick and thin for the last 2 years. But anyway, the winner this week was Premier Legault. That's what I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, you get exactly what you're asking for. You win.
Well, yesterday he stood at a podium and basically stood up and said, "Here's what I need from the NDP and the Conservatives to get my support." I mean, he's an incredibly popular leader right now,
and he seems to be doing all the right things in terms of COVID and what the province wants, right?
And I will also argue the rookie mistake of the week goes to Jagmeet Singh in terms of being baited into saying that he would support a Conservative government, which is just absolutely absurd. Watch for that one to be. That'll be back in the last 5 to 7 days of the election.
This morning he was asked about again in Thunder Bay and said, no, I wouldn't, because both the Liberals and the Conservatives are bad for the country. He's running to be Prime Minister, so he's not talking about.
New
exactly.
script.
That should have been his answer yesterday.
As long as the Liberals and NDP are bickering, I'm happy.
Don't worry, Max is there
for
you guys. Don't you worry.
We'll leave it there, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alison.
Neil, Cam, we will talk.
Thanks to all our viewers too.
Yeah, thanks to our viewers for
Cheers.
watching. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.
As we talk.
Bluesky Strategy Group is one of Canada's leading public affairs firms. For government relations, lobbying, and strategic communications advice across Canada, visit us at blueskystrategygroup.com. Bluesky Strategy Group is a proud member of the Global Communications Alliance.